Hello, Daphne here with another video for you. This is titled, Our Friend Bob Johnson / Edgar Whitcomb. My family's internment in a Japanese concentration camp in Shanghai was a nightmare, and that's an understatement. Yet many interesting stories came out of the experience there. People from all over the world, enemies of Japan, were interned with us, including a fellow American named Bob Johnson. Now, mind you, Bob had the patience of Job, because every time my twin sister and I would see him, our little tiny legs would run as fast as they could to him and give him a big hug. I guess it was a knee hug because we were probably just knee-high to a grasshopper at that age. But he was wonderful. He loved playing with us, and our whole faces lit up every time we saw this man. Unfortunately, I never knew him after concentration camp because my mother never told me about him. So this picture here was taken after the war in 1945 when he came to visit us in California. And look at that picture. He's up to his old tricks again, about to tickle me under my chin. And look at that darling, wonderful, beautiful, sweet smile on his face. What I found out later about how wonderful this man was really warmed my heart. But there was a lot more to Bob Johnson than playing with two little twin girls. He was a remarkable man, absolutely remarkable. He wrote a book called Escape from Corregidor, which was a story about his life in the Far East during the Second World War, how he got there and his experiences all the way through to when he returned home. And I can tell you in no uncertain terms, it was a miracle that he was not killed. Edgar Whitcomb wrote an intriguing, interesting book that I highly recommend called Escape from Corregidor. This book shows this man's incredible ingenuity in the face of, or I should say, against all odds. He was just an amazing man, and how he got out of the Second World War without being killed is an absolute miracle. But luckily for future generations, Bob Johnson, actually named Ed Whitcomb, wrote a book called Escape from Corregidor. If you haven't read it, I recommend it highly. It is just an incredible story of this man's survival against all odds. And I'd like to read you what Amazon wrote about this book. Here it is. At a crucial moment, Ed Whitcomb, a B-17 navigator, made a split-second decision and thereby set off a hair-raising, spine-tingling sequence of narrow escapes, captures, unexpected breaks, and bitter betrayals that culminated in his final extradition from enemy territory. Whitcomb reached Clark Field in the Philippines just before its demolition by the Japanese. He then evaded capture at the Fall of Bataan by fleeing in a rowboat to the bastion of Corregidor, where he was caught. Escaping under the cover of darkness, he swam 8 hours to the mainland in the darkness. Can you imagine that? Swimming 8 hours in unknown waters? I mean, the courage of this man was incredible. After weeks of struggle in a snake-infested jungle, he sailed by moonlight down the heavily patrolled coast, only to fall once again into the clutches of the enemy. Ed Whitcomb took a desperate chance for freedom because he did not want anybody to know that he was an American soldier. That would be the kiss of death. So, clenching his fists and raising them and facing his Japanese captor, he declared in no uncertain terms that his name was Bob Johnson, mining employee. So this book, Escape from Corregidor, is the story of a man who vowed never to give up, never to give in. He assumed the identity of a civilian and lived another man's life for almost 2 years. Neither hunger nor beatings, nor the long gray hopelessness of prison life could shake Ed Whitcomb's determination to escape the enemy and return home to his beloved state of Indiana. Ed Whitcomb is the epitome of the American fighting man. He has the courage and fortitude needed to defy all odds in order to bring honor and respect, not only to his state, but his country. Escape from Corregidor is the story, told with simplicity and fearlessness, of his dedication to the principles of devotion to his fellow man and his country. I can't recommend this book highly enough. Anyway, many years later, when I was an adult and visiting some dear friends in Indianapolis, Indiana, I was going over with them once again my story about our family's internment in a Japanese concentration camp. And for some reason, telling that story again made the bells go off in their head, and they wondered whether their friend, Ed Whitcomb, the former governor of Indiana, might have been in the same concentration camp as my family. So they went online and looked it up, and lo and behold, it was exactly the same internment camp. Oh my goodness, I couldn't believe it. But I had never heard of Bob Johnson or Edgar Whitcomb. So I was so surprised to learn about a fellow prisoner. So after returning home, I asked a relative about Bob Johnson. I said, "Did you know him? Did you see him? What's the story about this man?" And she told me that he was indeed a prisoner with us in concentration camp. But the very sad part of this story to me is that Edgar Whitcomb had just died 2 months prior to my learning this. I cannot begin to tell you the amount of sadness that came over me for not having a chance, as an adult, to meet this man that was so beloved by me and my twin sister all those years ago at an internment camp in Shanghai, China. I felt like I had missed out on such an incredibly special opportunity to learn more, not only about Bob himself, but my family and his interaction with them and his connection with them, because at this time also both my mother and father were gone. They had passed away. But I was happy to know that this man was part of my life as a little pesky person all those years ago, and that I did have a really true and strong connection that I really and truly feel to this day. But now that Ed is passed away and gone forever, all I can say to you, Ed, up there in heaven, is give 'em hell.